She only wanted a quiet birthday for her daughter. But when a billionaire stranger walked into their lives, everything changed with a single question. Can I stay? The late afternoon sky was painted with hues of pale blue and muted gray, the kind of winter light that made the world feel still and heavy. Snow flurries drifted lazily through the air, carried on a cold breeze that slipped through the cracks of buildings and wrapped around bundled up pedestrians like invisible fingers. It was the kind of day that made most people rush home, to warmth, to laughter, to family. But Zachary Haynes had nowhere to rush. He walked slowly down the sidewalk near the park, hands buried deep in the pockets of his brown wool coat. A man who had once turned boardrooms silent with a glance now felt like a stranger to the world around him. His polished shoes left clean imprints in the dusting of snow, each step echoing in his chest with a strange hollowness. He hadn't meant to come here. His driver had dropped him off outside the corporate tower, and instead of riding the elevator up to the penthouse office he owned, but no longer cared for, he had walked. He passed a row of shops with frosted windows, each one glowing with holiday lights and laughter spilling out. Couples, children, families. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. And then he saw her. She was sitting alone on a park bench, her tiny legs swinging above the snow-covered ground. A beige coat with fuzzy buttons was buttoned all the way to her chin, and a cream-colored knit hat with a pom-pom nearly covered her eyes. In her mittened hands, she clutched a paper bag of breadcrumbs, tossing them gently toward a small group of birds that pecked at the ground near her feet. Zachary might have kept walking. He had no reason to stop. But something about the stillness of the scene made him pause. Maybe it was the contrast, such quiet peace in the middle of a bustling, uncaring city. Or maybe it was that, in that moment, she looked as alone as he felt. He hesitated only briefly before slowly making his way toward the bench, careful not to startle her. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up at him with wide brown eyes under pale blonde bangs. "You look lonely," she said simply, as if she were commenting on the weather. Zachary blinked, taken off guard. "Do I?" She nodded, thoughtful. "My mommy says I'm good at noticing feelings." He smiled faintly. "Your mommy sounds smart." "She is." The girl shifted, then patted the empty space beside her. "You can sit. The birds don't mind." He hesitated for only a second, then lowered himself onto the cold bench, wincing slightly at the chill. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, watching the birds. "I'm Lily," she said after a beat. "I'm 6, almost 7. "Zach," he replied, clearing his throat. "Nice to meet you, Lily." She studied him for a moment, then asked softly, "You don't have a family either, do you?" Zachary's breath caught. The question, so innocent and direct, struck something raw inside him. He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "I used to," he said finally, his voice quieter than he intended. "But not anymore." Lily nodded as if she understood something unspoken. "My daddy went to heaven when I was 3. Mommy says that's why I love making people smile. 'Cause sometimes they forget how." Zachary turned away slightly, blinking hard against the sting in his eyes. Of all the boardroom battles, all the corporate wars, all the acquisitions and headlines, nothing had ever hit him the way that single sentence did. He swallowed. "You're very kind, Lily." She shrugged. "Not always. But today I feel like being kind." They sat together a while longer, the sky growing dimmer, the city lights flickering on around them like stars waking up. A few more birds flapped away into the trees, and Lily stood, brushing off her coat. "My mommy's inside the cafe," she said, pointing across the street. "You should meet her. She's beautiful, but she looks sad sometimes, too." Zachary stood slowly, unsure what he was doing, only knowing that he didn't want to walk away yet. Lily took his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She always says not to talk to strangers," she added, glancing up at him with a mischievous smile. "But I think you're the kind of stranger that makes the world a little nicer." And just like that, he followed her across the snowy street, not because he was curious, not even because he was lonely, but because, for the first time in years, someone had seen through the expensive coat and empty success. And maybe, just maybe, that was where something real could begin. The cafe was small but warm, its windows fogged with condensation and framed in soft golden lights. A bell above the door gave a soft jingle as Lily led Zachary inside. The rich scent of roasted coffee beans and baked cinnamon filled the air, like a comforting embrace. Zachary paused just past the threshold, feeling oddly self-conscious. He didn't belong in places like this. Quiet, cozy corners of the world where people came to find warmth and simplicity. He was used to sterile offices, sleek hotel lounges, and curated fine dining. This cafe, with its chipped mugs, creaky floors, and mismatched chairs, felt startlingly human. "There she is," Lily chirped, pointing toward the counter. Zachary followed her gaze. The woman behind the counter turned just in time to meet his eyes. She was pouring steamed milk into a paper cup, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun, a few soft strands falling over her cheek. Her green wool coat hung on the back of a nearby chair, and her name tag, Emma, glinted faintly under the warm lights. Emma looked up, eyebrows raised as she spotted Lily and the tall stranger beside her. Lily ran ahead. "Mommy, this is Mr. Zach. He was cold and alone, so I shared my crumbs with him. He's nice." Zachary felt the weight of Emma's gaze as he approached. She studied him with quiet caution, her posture straightening subtly. Not hostile, just protective. "I hope she wasn't bothering you," she said calmly, her voice smooth but edged with concern. "Not at all," Zachary replied gently. "She was kind enough to share a bench and some wisdom." Emma's lips quirked into something between surprise and a smile. She wiped her hands on a towel and stepped around the counter, crouching to unbutton Lily's coat. "Go sit and color, sweetheart. I'll be right over." Lily skipped away to a small corner table with crayons and napkins scattered across its surface. Emma straightened and looked up at him. Now that she was closer, Zachary noticed the deep warmth in her eyes. Brown, not flat, but expressive, like polished amber. There was something about her that felt familiar in the way that old songs do. Soothing, unassuming, quietly beautiful. "Thank you for walking her over," she said. "I usually don't let her wander like that, but this place is right across from the park, and I can see her through the window." Zachary nodded. "You don't need to explain. She was perfectly safe, and disarmingly insightful." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. She told you you looked lonely?" "She did. She does that." Emma's tone softened. "She notices things. Always has." There was a brief silence between them, not uncomfortable, just reflective. Zachary glanced around, trying to gather himself. "This is a lovely cafe," he said. Emma gave a small smile. "It's not mine. I just help out sometimes when my friend needs an extra pair of hands. I'm actually a full-time librarian." "Ah," he said, nodding. "Explains the crayons and napkins." "And the organized book corner," she added. He followed her gesture toward a low shelf by the window filled with children's books. Neatly arranged, well-loved. The space felt cared for, intentional. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked. "Coffee? Tea?" Zachary hesitated, unused to being offered anything without an assistant in the middle. But this was different. "I'll take whatever you recommend." A few minutes later, she brought over a steaming cup of chai latte with oat milk and a hint of vanilla. "Something warm and not bitter," she said. He took a sip and closed his eyes briefly. "This is incredible." Emma leaned against the opposite side of the counter. "So, Zach, what brings you to our side of town?" He considered lying, saying something vague, but for some reason he didn't. "I wasn't planning on being here. I stepped out of my office and just walked. I guess I needed quiet, or maybe I needed something I didn't know how to name." Emma tilted her head, searching his expression. She didn't press, didn't pry. "You found Lily instead." "Yes," he said, "and she asked me something no one's dared to in years." Emma chuckled quietly, then looked away for a moment, her smile fading slightly. "She lost her dad when she was 3. It left gaps in her world, questions that little hearts shouldn't have to carry." He nodded solemnly. "I know something about that." Emma looked at him again, this time with more softness and just a trace of her earlier guard. "Mr. Zach," Lily called suddenly from the corner. "I drew you." Zachary stood and walked over to her. On a napkin, Lily had drawn 3 stick figures, one tall in a brown coat, one small in a beige one, and a woman in green. All of them were holding hands under a big yellow sun. "I didn't add a dog yet," Lily said matter-of-factly, "but I think you'd like dogs." Zachary knelt beside her, deeply moved. "It's perfect, Lily." Emma came over, glancing at the drawing. Her eyes lingered for a beat too long on the joined hands. "It's getting dark," she said gently. "We should head home." Zachary stood. "Of course. Thank you again for the chai and the company." Emma smiled politely. "It was unexpected, but nice." Lily jumped up and reached for her mother's hand. But before they left, she turned and wrapped her arms around Zachary's leg in a sudden, spontaneous hug. "You should come back," she said. Zachary looked at Emma. She didn't answer, just gave him a look full of mixed emotions. Then they walked out into the night, mother and daughter, their silhouettes fading into the swirl of snow. Zachary stood there for a long time after the bell above the door stopped ringing. He had entered that cafe a stranger, but something inside him had shifted. And somehow, without meaning to, he already knew he'd return. Zachary Haynes sat in his office on the 34th floor of the glass-paneled tower that bore his company's name, staring out the window but seeing nothing. The city below moved as always, fast, loud, indifferent. His desk was spotless. 3 calls blinked red on hold. An untouched espresso cooled beside his elbow. He should have been focused. The company was finalizing a merger worth over $3 billion. His team was expecting his sign-off, but none of it mattered, not right now, because all he could think about was a drawing on a napkin. It lay carefully tucked inside his briefcase, where no one would dare look, a child's simple image of 3 stick figures holding hands. Lily had drawn him as one of them, without hesitation. And somehow that gesture had made everything in his world, the polished floors, the expensive watch on his wrist, the calculated schedules, feel unbearably hollow. He pulled open his drawer, grabbed a file folder, and without overthinking it, tapped the intercom. "Call off my afternoon meetings," he told his assistant. "Sir, the acquisition team is flying in from Singapore." "I know. Reschedule. Tell them there's been a change of priorities." A pause. "Understood." Zachary stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out without another word. By the time he arrived at the small neighborhood library, the late morning sun had pierced through the gray clouds. The building was modest, old brick with ivy along one wall and a faded wooden sign above the door. It wasn't the kind of place a CEO usually visited. But then, Emma wasn't the kind of woman he usually met. The bell over the door jingled softly as he entered. Inside, the scent of paper and old wood settled around him like a whisper. Children's laughter drifted from the far corner. He turned toward the sound and saw her. Emma was crouched beside a small reading circle, reading aloud to a group of kids. Her voice was warm, animated, each sentence painting pictures in the air. Lily was among them, her head tilted in attention. Neither of them noticed him at first, and for a moment he simply watched. This life so different from his own, but so full of something he couldn't quite name. When Emma finally looked up and saw him, her expression froze for a second, then relaxed into polite surprise. She closed the book gently, gave the children a smile, and stood to approach him. "You again," she said softly, with just enough teasing in her tone. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Zachary said. Emma crossed her arms loosely. "Not exactly the usual lunchtime guest." He gave a sheepish nod. "I didn't come with a plan. I just wanted to see how you both were." She studied him for a moment, then gestured toward a small corner by the window, away from the children's area. "Come sit." They moved to the table, and she slid him a small cup of library-grade coffee, which he accepted without complaint. "I don't often see billionaires in cardigans," she said with a faint smirk, noting his dressed-down look. "I had a feeling a tailored suit might be too loud for a library." "You'd be right." They both smiled. A little too long. Zachary sipped his coffee, wincing slightly. "Not quite your chai latte." "No one makes it like I do," she replied. He leaned forward slightly. "You've created something rare here, you know. A real space for people." Emma looked away, a trace of vulnerability flickering across her face. "I try. I didn't know I'd be here forever, but after my husband passed, everything changed. The world didn't feel safe anymore. But this place, this little library, gave me purpose again." He nodded, something heavy tightening in his chest. "I understand more than you think." She looked at him curiously. "Do you?" He hesitated. "My younger sister passed away when I was 25. Cancer. She was my anchor. When she died, I threw myself into work, built this company from the ground up. Everyone called me brilliant, Visionary. But the truth is, I was just hiding. Emma's expression softened. I'm sorry. He gave a small nod. You don't need to be. You and Lily, you reminded me what it feels like to be seen again. Emma blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. I don't know what to say to that, she admitted. You don't need to say anything. Just then Lily ran over, holding a library book in both hands. Mr. Zach, this book is about dogs who fly planes. Want to read it with me? He laughed, the sound raw and unpolished. Absolutely. He sat cross-legged on the rug with her, book spread between them. Emma watched from a few feet away, arms folded, heart fluttering with something she hadn't felt in years. Cautious hope. There was something in the way Zachary listened to Lily, how he asked her questions, how he laughed when she did. It wasn't forced, it wasn't charity, it was connection. And it scared her, because she hadn't expected to feel anything for anyone again, much less someone like him. But he was there, on the floor in her world, not asking for anything, just showing up. When it was time to close the library for the afternoon, Zachary stood reluctantly. Lily clung to his arm. Will you come back tomorrow? He looked at Emma. I'd like to, he said, his voice low, sincere. Emma hesitated, and then nodded once. I think we'd like that too. He smiled, placed a gentle hand on Lily's head, and walked out into the sunlight, a new warmth blooming quietly in his chest. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The following days slipped by with surprising ease. Zachary found himself returning to the small neighborhood library again and again, always without fanfare. No press, no assistance, no briefcase, just him. Each time he stepped through the door, something softened inside him. He became familiar with the daily rhythms, the bell's soft jingle, the scent of old books, the way Lily's face lit up when she saw him. She would grab his hand without asking, dragging him toward her favorite corner, ready to read another story or show off her newest drawing. Emma began offering him a real cup of coffee instead of the weak library brew, and he'd accepted it like a secret pact. It wasn't just the connection with Lily that pulled him back. It was Emma. There was something about her quiet resilience, the way she seemed to hold strength and sorrow in equal measure, that fascinated him. She didn't try to impress him. She never asked what he did for a living or what car he drove. She spoke to him like he was just a man, not a headline or a bank balance. And that, more than anything, made him want to be around her. On Friday afternoon, Emma invited him to join them at a nearby park after the library closed. It's a little tradition, she said, adjusting her scarf. Lily and I walk there at the end of the week. It helps her unwind, helps me breathe. Zachary had nodded without hesitation. Now, as the three of them strolled through the nearly empty park, the winter wind tugging playfully at scarves and hair, Zachary felt something strange creeping in. Peace. Lily ran ahead, chasing a patch of sun through the bare trees. Zachary and Emma followed slowly, their shoulders almost brushing. She's incredible, he said quietly. She's everything, Emma replied, her voice tinged with pride, and something more complex. After Michael died, I thought I wouldn't be able to raise her on my own. I felt like the world suddenly had no color, but she brought it back, one laugh at a time. Zachary looked at her, really looked. How long has it been? 3 years, she said, exhaling into the cold air. He was coming home from work, a drunk driver. One moment everything was normal, and the next, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. I'm sorry, he said softly. Emma gave a nod of thanks. People stop saying that after a while. They think grief has an expiration date. Zachary glanced away, throat tight. It doesn't. They walked in silence for a moment, the sound of Lily's laughter floating back to them like music. Then Emma turned to him. You seem like someone who knows what it's like to lose something big. I lost my sister, he said, voice rough. A long time ago. She was the only person who really knew me before everything else. Emma didn't ask what everything else meant. She didn't need to. They reached a bench and Emma brushed off some frost before sitting down. Zachary joined her. She looked at him then, her expression unreadable. I don't really know who you are, Zach. I mean, I know who you are to Lily, but not you. He hesitated. Then with a small breath, he said, My name is Zachary Haynes. I run a global tech firm called Virex. It's big. Too big, maybe. Emma blinked, surprised, but not in the way most people were. There was no awe, no suspicion, just quiet processing. That's why your suit fit too well, she said finally, a playful smile creeping in. He laughed softly. I was hoping to go incognito. Well, you fooled Lily. And that's not easy. They both watched as Lily knelt in the snow to build a tiny snowman, completely absorbed. I don't usually tell people what I do, Zachary said after a beat. Not because I'm hiding, but because the moment I do, they stop seeing me. They see a number, an opportunity, or a threat. Emma nodded slowly. I know that feeling. After Michael died, people started treating me like glass, as if I'd shatter if they touched the wrong nerve. He looked at her. You didn't. No, she said, but I had to learn how to hold myself together. Zachary leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You shouldn't have had to. Emma turned her head toward him. Their eyes met, and this time, there was something unmistakable in the space between them. Not just comfort, not just understanding. Attraction, raw, cautious, but real. Emma broke eye contact first. Lily's birthday is next weekend, she said, voice quieter now. She wants to have a little party at the library. Just a few friends, some cake, a lot of glitter. He smiled. Sounds perfect. She asked if you'd come. Zachary's chest tightened. I'd be honored, he said. Emma nodded, eyes on the horizon. She doesn't let many people in. Neither do I. They sat for a while longer, saying little, just watching Lily, just breathing. When they finally stood and began walking back, Emma didn't move away when his hand brushed hers. And for the first time since his sister's funeral, Zachary realized he was allowing himself to hope. Not for success, not for recognition, for something simple, for connection. Zachary had barely stepped out of the elevator when his phone began to vibrate insistently in his coat pocket. He ignored it. He didn't want the world he had built, the world of urgent boardroom decisions and constant demands, crashing in just yet. Not after the week he'd had, not after the walk in the park, or the way Emma had looked at him when she invited him to Lily's birthday party. He had felt something real, something dangerous in its tenderness. But by the time he reached his penthouse, the texts had piled up like a storm cloud. He scanned the notifications quickly, his heart sinking. Urgent. Local protest forming over the Glenwood project. Media coverage escalating. CEO requested. He exhaled slowly. Glenwood. The word hit him like a slap. It was a parcel of land scheduled for redevelopment on the outskirts of the city. A project his company had greenlit months ago. A public park. Neglected. Underutilized, the report said. The board had voted to convert it into a luxury apartment complex with high-end retail. Zachary had signed the final go-ahead himself, and now as he read the headlines, his stomach turned. Because Glenwood Park was the same place Emma had once mentioned on their walk. Her late husband's favorite spot, the place where he'd proposed to her, the place where they used to bring Lily when she was a baby. Zachary stared at the glowing city skyline from his window, suddenly feeling cold. He hadn't connected the dots, hadn't even considered it. To him, Glenwood had just been another project in a folder, a line item, a square of real estate surrounded by profit potential. But to Emma, it was a memory, a home once. He sat down heavily, a gnawing guilt settling in his chest like ice. The following morning, he arrived at the library expecting the usual warmth. Lily greeted him at the door with her signature bounce, but Emma's reaction was different. Subtle, but unmistakable. Her posture shifted. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She knew. He followed her inside, helped Lily stack books on the small shelf, and when the moment came that Lily scampered off to her reading corner, he turned to Emma. You saw the news, he said quietly. She didn't answer right away. She stood with her back to him, sorting returned books into a bin. Her hands moved a little too deliberately. I did, she said finally. I didn't know, Zachary said. When we talked about the park that day, I didn't make the connection. I swear to you, Emma, it wasn't intentional. Emma turned around then, and her face wasn't angry. It was disappointed. And somehow, that was worse. You approved it, she said. You were the one behind it. Yes, he said. But But what? She asked, her voice low, sharp. You didn't think it mattered? That it was just a dead space on a map? A number? He didn't speak. He couldn't. That park was the last place Lily saw her dad laugh, Emma continued. It's where he taught her how to walk on the balance beam made of old railroad ties. It's where I go when I feel like I can't breathe. Zachary felt every word like a blow. I've tried so hard not to expect anything from you, she said, her voice trembling now. Because people like you show up, you smile, and then you disappear when it's inconvenient. I'm not disappearing, he said, stepping closer. I'm not that man. Then prove it, she said, eyes fierce with hurt and challenge. Don't just say you care about Lily. Don't just say you care about me. Show me, or walk away now. The room was quiet, except for the muffled sound of a child reading to herself nearby. The air between them was thick, charged, fragile. Zachary nodded slowly. Give me until her birthday, he said. Let me make this right. Emma didn't respond, but she didn't tell him to leave either. That night, Zachary didn't sleep. He pored over every report, every zoning permit, every contract associated with the Glenwood project. He called a midnight meeting with his legal team. When they resisted the idea of halting the development, he didn't negotiate. He ordered it. Full stop. The following day, headlines exploded. Billionaire CEO suspends $180 million real estate project amid local backlash. But Zachary didn't care about the PR. He wasn't trying to clean his image. He was trying to undo a wound. By Friday, he had secured an alternate location for the development, renegotiated with the investors, and announced a public donation to preserve Glenwood Park as a historical landmark and create a new community center on its grounds. He named the project after Michael, Emma's late husband. The press didn't understand. The board was furious. But Zachary? He finally felt something he hadn't in years. Free. And somewhere, deep in his chest, he held on to one quiet, flickering hope. That Emma might see him now, not as a man with money, but as a man who could change. As a man who cared enough to try. The library felt different when Zachary walked in that morning. It wasn't the scent of old books or the filtered winter light through the tall windows. It was something quieter, more delicate, as if the air itself had shifted. Not tense, not warm either, just waiting. Lily was at her usual spot near the children's section, carefully arranging paper flowers for her birthday table. When she saw Zachary, her entire face lit up, and she jumped up, running straight into his arms with her small hands flung around his waist. You came, she said breathlessly. I made name cards. Yours has a star on it, Zachary chuckled, ruffling her hair. A star? That's a pretty big honor. You're the only one who's not in my class but still invited, she said with pride. He looked over her shoulder and met Emma's eyes from across the room. She was standing behind the counter, her hands folded, watching. No smile, no frown, just unreadable. Zachary gave Lily's shoulder a gentle squeeze and walked toward Emma. She met him halfway in the quiet aisle between the fiction and biography sections. I saw what you did, she said quietly. His heart beat faster. It wasn't a favor, he replied. It wasn't about guilt. I saw it through your eyes and hers, and I realized I couldn't let the people I care about live in a world I helped tear apart. Emma nodded slowly. You made a lot of people very angry. I've made a lot of money for angry people, he said. It's time they learn who I really am. There was silence between them, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was the silence of something beginning to rebuild. Emma looked down. Lily keeps drawing pictures of you. She says you're part of her circle now. Zachary swallowed hard. She's become part of mine. Emma's eyes rose to meet his again. And there it was, the first flicker of forgiveness, or maybe not forgiveness, exactly. Maybe recognition, of effort, of sincerity, of change. Her birthday is tomorrow, she said, her voice gentler now. She's so excited. She's been talking about nothing else for days. Zachary smiled. She asked me to bring balloons. I may have accidentally promised a rainbow arch. Emma actually laughed then. A real laugh, soft but genuine. Of course you did. Later that afternoon, Zachary stayed after hours, helping Emma fold paper garlands and glue confetti onto brown paper bags. They worked side by side in the back room, arms brushing occasionally, small jokes slipping into their rhythm like old memories. At one point, Emma paused, watching him. "You're not what I expected." He looked at her, amused. "What did you expect? A man with walls so high no one could climb them. A stranger who'd vanish after a week. Someone polished and cold. Was I? At first," she admitted. "But then you let my daughter wrap you in pipe cleaner bracelets and talk your ear off about unicorns. That's hard to fake." "I wouldn't dare fake anything with Lily," he said seriously. "Or with you." Emma hesitated. Then she said something softer. "And you named the Glenwood Project after Michael." Zachary nodded. It felt like the right thing. Not as a gesture, as a foundation. Her eyes shone slightly, but she didn't look away. He would have appreciated that. He looked at her carefully. "Do you?" Emma exhaled, a long breath she'd been holding for days. "I think I'm starting to." As the sun dipped below the edge of the window and the golden hour light painted her hair, Zachary reached across the table and gently took her hand. Not with urgency, not with pressure, but with steadiness. She didn't pull away. And in that stillness, with glue sticks and paper flowers between them, something unspoken passed. Not declarations, not romance in the loud, sweeping way, but trust. Tiny, fragile, real. When they walked out together, he didn't ask for more, because he knew what he had been given that day. Another chance. And the quiet understanding that the best things, the most lasting, the most healing, never came in a rush. They grew slowly in honest moments under careful hands, like Lily's drawings, like Emma's guarded smile, like something worth staying for. The morning of Lily's birthday arrived crisp and bright, the late winter sun breaking through the clouds in warm streaks of gold. The library had never looked so alive. Streamers made from recycled pages fluttered from shelves. Balloons arched like a rainbow across the front entrance. Hand-drawn signs decorated the walls with glittery letters that read, "Happy birthday, Lily." Emma moved through the space with a calm urgency, her green sweater dusted in flour from the homemade cupcakes she'd baked at sunrise. She checked the gift table, adjusted the music speaker in the corner, and helped Lily into her party dress. A pale yellow one with tiny embroidered stars that made her feel, as she proudly announced, just like the sunshine. Zachary arrived right on time. He stepped in quietly, carrying a bouquet of cheerful wildflowers in one hand and a large box in the other, wrapped in silver with a soft white ribbon. He wore a casual gray coat over a sweater, but his polished shoes still gave him away. Just a little. Lily spotted him first. "Mr. Zach!" she yelled, launching herself toward him with arms wide open. Zachary caught her effortlessly and twirled her once before setting her down. "Happy birthday, Lily. These are for you," he said, offering her the bouquet. "And this, well, I was told you're now officially 7, which means it's time for a serious birthday gift." She gasped dramatically and tore into the package with glee. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden dollhouse with tiny furniture inside, some pieces hand-painted. On the living room table sat 3 little figurines, a tall man, a blonde woman, and a little girl with yellow ribbons in her hair. Emma, watching from a few feet away, blinked hard. Zachary met her eyes. He didn't speak, but his expression said everything. "I see you. I see her. I've been listening." The party filled quickly with neighborhood kids and a few parents Emma had known for years. The little library buzzed with laughter and the occasional scream of excitement. Kids played pin the tail on the unicorn. There was a cupcake decorating station. Someone brought a bubble machine. Through it all, Zachary stayed, not in the background, not awkwardly lingering, but fully present. He tied balloons, helped a toddler find a missing shoe, even played musical chairs and nearly lost to a 6-year-old with fierce competitive instincts. Emma caught herself watching him more than once, her arms folded across her chest, uncertain. He was different. He wasn't charming in the performative way. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't networking. He was simply there. When it was time for cake, the room quieted. A single candle stood on top of a strawberry-frosted cupcake, and everyone leaned in as Emma knelt beside Lily. "Make a wish, sweetheart." Lily looked at her mother, then at Zachary. Her little face became unusually serious. "I already got my wish," she whispered. "He came." The moment passed like a whisper. Emma closed her eyes. After the party, once the kids had been picked up and the last streamers taken down, Zachary stayed behind to help clean up. The library was quiet again. Emma stood behind the counter, the light casting a warm glow through her hair. She glanced at him as he stacked the last set of folding chairs. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to. A pause. She loves you, you know, Emma said, her voice quieter now. I think she needed someone like you in her life. Zachary turned to face her fully. She's made more difference in mine than I ever expected. Emma exhaled and stepped out from behind the counter, crossing the space between them. Why? She asked gently. Why are you still here? The question hung between them, not accusatory but vulnerable. Honest. Zachary didn't hesitate. Because I see something here that I didn't know I was missing. I've spent years surrounded by people who want what I can give them. But you looked at me and didn't see power or status. You saw someone who needed to slow down, who needed to feel. Emma blinked, stunned. He stepped a little closer. And maybe, he added, his voice low and earnest, I'm staying because I think there's still a part of your heart that hasn't given up on being loved. Emma's breath caught. The room felt smaller, softer. She looked at him with wide eyes, her guard still raised, but trembling. I'm afraid, she whispered, to let someone in again, to let Lily love someone who might leave. I won't leave, he said, not unless you tell me to. And then for the first time since they met, Emma stepped forward and gently rested her hand on his chest, just over his heart. You make it hard to keep pretending I don't want this, she said. Zachary's hand covered hers, steady and warm. They didn't kiss. Not yet. It wasn't the time, but it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are the bravest part of all. The library had always been a place of comfort, but today it felt sacred. A week had passed since Lily's birthday party, and in the quiet aftermath, life had settled into something unexpected. A rhythm. Zachary visited nearly every day, sometimes to help Emma restock the children's section, other times just to sit and read with Lily after school. It became natural, familiar. Not a spectacle or a decision, but something that simply was. But something hung between him and Emma still, something neither of them had fully named. A possibility, a question, a shared breath they hadn't yet exhaled. That Friday evening, the library had closed early due to a cold snap and the threat of snow. The streets outside were already dusted white, flakes catching in the golden glow of street lamps. Zachary hadn't planned to visit that night, but when his final meeting ran long, he felt the pull stronger than ever. When he arrived, the lights inside the library were dim, but still on. He knocked lightly and let himself in. Emma was behind the counter, sorting receipts, her green coat still buttoned up as if she had only just come in herself. She looked up in surprise, a smile forming instinctively when she saw him. I thought you'd be out closing another billion-dollar deal, she said playfully, setting her pen down. Not tonight, he said, brushing snow off his shoulders. I wanted to see you. Emma's smile softened, but she said nothing. She moved from behind the counter and gestured toward the lounge corner near the front window, where the armchairs faced the snowfall. Come sit. They sat side by side quietly for a few minutes, watching the flakes drift by. The city looked far away, almost like a painting. Emma finally broke the silence. Lily asked me today if you were going to be here forever. Zachary turned his head slowly. What did you say? I told her I didn't know, that it's not something I can promise. He nodded slowly, understanding the fear behind her words. She deserves that honesty. Emma looked down at her hands in her lap. I think I do too. Zachary reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her, and she opened it gently. It was Lily's drawing, but not just anyone. This was new. 3 stick figures stood under a snowy tree. One tall with brown hair and a smile, one with long yellow hair and a crown of stars, and between them, a little girl with a heart on her shirt. Above it, written in Lily's blocky handwriting, My Forever Family. Emma stared at the drawing, her eyes stinging with tears she didn't know were coming. I didn't ask her to draw that, Zachary said softly. I swear, but I realized when she gave it to me. I want that too. Emma's fingers curled gently over the paper. Zach, I've lived in silence for so long, he continued, his voice low but certain. I thought I needed power, success, legacy, but I didn't. I needed a reason to open my heart again. You and Lily gave me that without ever asking for it. Emma turned to look at him. Really look, her eyes searching, full of feeling, full of caution and something deeper, something brave. I'm scared, she whispered, because if I let you in completely, there's no halfway. I can't let Lily lose someone else. Zachary reached out and took her hand, slowly, reverently. Then don't let me be someone else. Let me be the one who stays. Emma blinked hard. A tear slipped down her cheek and she laughed softly as she wiped it away. You're not very good at this, you know. At what? Being careful. He smiled, the corner of his mouth pulling into something more vulnerable than she'd ever seen on him. I don't want to be careful anymore, he said. Not with you. And finally, she leaned in, resting her forehead against his. The kiss came not as a sudden explosion, but as something inevitable. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't fiery. It was warm, like two pieces of a puzzle finally pressed into place. It was quiet and deep and grounding. When they pulled back, Emma was smiling. I think Lily's already claimed you, you know, she said. There's no going back. I wouldn't want to, he replied. They sat there in the quiet again, their hands still intertwined, the world outside dissolving into snow. Later that night, Zachary walked home through the snowfall. He looked up into the cold sky and smiled to himself. Not because of what he'd accomplished or what he owned, but because of what he had found. A child's laughter, a woman's truth, a future he'd never imagined. A family, not by blood, not by design, but by love. The ending of this story is not about grand gestures or fairy tale miracles. It's about quiet healing, the kind that comes from being truly seen by someone after years of holding your breath. Zachary's transformation wasn't instant or effortless. It was messy, humbling, and deeply human. That's what makes his redemption feel real. Emma's strength was never in building walls. It was in knowing when to lower them, even if it terrified her. And Lily, in her innocence, was the bridge between two adults who had almost forgotten how to hope. This wasn't a story about wealth saving the day. It was about presence over power, about listening instead of fixing. The happiest endings aren't always the loudest. They're the ones where people choose to stay, day after day, even when they could walk away. In the end, it wasn't love at first sight. It was love at first truth. And that, I think, is the kind of ending that lasts.